Ayurveda is India's holistic medical system. And I always think it's interesting to see the foundational principles of something. So, in this system of healing, it's based on the knowledge that a human soul is pure awareness, linked with, but not limited to, the mind body complex. So, that's a quote from David Frawley, the American Institute of Vedic Studies. And Dr. Frawley was associated with my meditation teacher, Swami Veda, and considered themselves kindred souls in a lot of the ways that they understand Veda and Ayurveda. So, ether, we're going to work with these 5 elements. And then these 5 elements are brought down into the doshas. And that's what we're working with today. Ether is the space, and it governs hearing, ears, and speech. Air is what we think of more when we think of vata, and it's moving, it's ether that's moving, and prana, which is the life force, is the flow of consciousness. And so vata, and in particular the air element, governs the tactile perceptions, skin, actions of giving and receiving, movement. And fire, pitta, is fire and water. And fire is this friction that's created by movement. It also governs the transformative processes, vision, eyes, walking. Now, water governs taste, the tongue, and creation, the genitals. And then earth, so kapha is a combination of water and earth. Earth is that firm ground for life, and it governs smell, the nose, and excretion. This is how the ancient system has conceptualized or divided up our elements into how they manifest in our bodies. We have vata, pitta, kapha. If you already know your dosha, so the doshas are vata, pitta, and kapha, then you would be able to kind of associate some of these things. I've divided them into different levels so that we can go through. And if you don't know your dosha yet, don't worry about it. You'll be able to get a sense of that through this. And most people are a combination of 2. A few people are a combination of all 3. So if you do one of the online tests or one of the tests for what your dosha is, then you'll be able to tell. So mine, for instance, is kapha pitta, actually a little bit more heavily predominant on the kapha. So let's just go through and then we'll see where that takes us. So vata is elements of air and space, responsible for movement and communication. Pitta, digestion, metabolism. Kapha, stability and structure. So they each have their own kind of arena in where they work. Some of the qualities of vata: dry, light, cold, rough, movement, agitated movement, especially. Pitta, if we think about fire, it's hot, sharp, light, and in the body it's a bit oily or moist. Then kapha is this cold, wet, heavy, dull. It can be sticky, slimy, or smooth and soft, but it's steady, static. There's not a lot of agitated movement in kapha. It's very steady, dense. When they're in balance or whether they're unbalanced, it makes a big difference. So none of the qualities are bad on their own or undesirable on their own, but we need to be in balance for them. So if when you think about your own body, your body mind, if you tend to be more hot and agitated, if you tend to be a little bit more stable, steady, or if you have that kind of lightness of vata, people with vata are often very creative as well. So these are some of the arenas where they work. So creativity and joy, communication, these are vata influenced. Heart function, circulation. Again, it's this movement, elimination of wastes, but also movement of thoughts and feelings and the general function of our nervous system. So when vata is balanced, the nervous system is regulated. And people with a lot of vata element, especially if they're imbalanced, tend to be anxious, agitated, hard to settle. So as you can see, all of these qualities have their own strengths. And it's not about some are better than others. It's about what is my combination at this moment. And some of these are lifetime, some of these are kind of present moment. So we have a bit of action on both. Sometimes they change through our lifetime as well. People tend to get more vata as they get older. So we get drier, a little bit more movement oriented, trouble sleeping. So pitta is intelligence, valor, understanding. It affects hunger and thirst, digestion and heat in the body and the mind, health of the skin, regulation of the liver. And what we're looking at with, if, for instance, with health of the skin, if you have a lot of hot heat, if you think about a prickly heat rash, that's an overdoing of pitta. And people with a lot of pitta in their bodies already are more susceptible to that kind of rashes and things going on with their skin if they get too much. So kapha, the stable kapha one, is content, easy to forgive, compassion, growth, and a lot of stamina. So we have that stability and strength, and we can really work. One of my issues is I tend to work too many hours and I don't get enough movement and other things, creativity and joy. I tend to kind of hunker down and really work hard. And so I have a lot of stamina from that. It affects nourishment, lubrication, repair and regeneration, memory. So we have a lot of those kinds of qualities related to the earth and the water elements with kapha. So as you're looking at this slide, which of those qualities seem to be more predominant in you is one way to be looking at what our dosha is. And you'll probably notice there's some of each and probably more of some than others. It's the balance. So if we have a balanced vata, it's creativity, enthusiasm, lots of energy. Imbalanced, it can be anxiety and nervousness and insomnia. So when you have the PDFs, you'll be able to click on these and get more information on the different ones. There's a bunch of links through this particular PDF. So pitta, when it's balanced, it's intelligence, focus, and motivation, but it's not overdoing it. Imbalanced, it can lead to anger, irritability, and a lot of inflammation in the body. Kapha, balanced, is strength, endurance, and calmness. But if it's too much kapha, then we get that kind of sluggishness, depression, weight gain. There's different ways that we go into imbalance, and then different ways that Ayurveda talks about to come back into balance. So we can learn more about each of those doshas here. So let's go a little bit now into each of them. I would say that it's helpful to know a little bit about all of them. So even if you don't have a lot of vata in your system, you can get dysregulated or your vata can go out of balance. Like I mentioned, as you get older, we tend to be drier. We tend to have more vata, but also in the spring and fall when there's a lot of wind is destabilizing to vata. There's a lot of movement. So creating a sense of routine and stability is very helpful for people with vata or whose vata is imbalanced, but also really nourishing the body with warm, grounding foods and activities. But if you think about a lot of people who have that kind of bird-like quality of vata, they tend to say, oh yeah, all I ever eat is salads. But that dry, crunchy, cold food is actually not good, or it's not stabilizing for someone with a lot of vata. So warm soups and stews and different things that are warm and grounding are more helpful. It helps to soothe or calm that. A regular routine is really helpful for someone with vata, especially because they tend to have trouble sleeping. So if you get into a routine, and we'll get into the Ayurvedic clock in a little while, if you get into a routine around waking up, eating, exercise, and sleeping, then it gives a vata more stability. So engaging in anything is grounding. So if you're doing walking in nature, gardening, yoga, but also how you do your yoga practice is really dependent on if you're wanting to calm vata, it would be very different than trying to energize kapha, for instance. You might be attracted to a really hot, fiery yoga practice if you're a pitta, have more pitta, but we're always wanting to be coming back into balance. We're going to work next week with abhyasa, which is oiling the body with that Ayurveda uses. And so if you have a lot of vata, you want to use calm, warming oils for this self massage. So sesame is a heavy oil. If you're a kapha type, you probably wouldn't want to use sesame. But if you're a vata type, if you have a lot of that airy, I need to be more grounded, then a heavier oil will be more helpful for that. And then if you have a lot of that kind of moving anxiety, you're probably going to want to do things that are not going to agitate that. So avoiding stimulants like caffeine because they increase anxiety. Regular meditation helps to calm the mind. And then also vata people can be quite sensitive to cold. And so if it's cold, windy weather like we often get in the spring or fall, to dress warmly. Several years ago, I for some reason thought I'm always hunched up whenever it's cold outside, so I started wearing scarves. It made quite a difference. So if you have a lot of that vata, or if you're feeling imbalanced, then make sure that you're wearing warm enough clothes and scarves and sweaters that you're not kind of toughing it out and not noticing what's happening in your body. So pitta is the opposite when it comes to heat and cold. And when it's unbalanced, if you think about a hothead, someone who's a hothead, irritable, they also might have digestive issues like colitis, something that's caused by inflammation. It's interesting that whatever dosha we are, we tend to be attracted to things that aren't actually helpful for us. So lots of times you'll find people that have a lot of pitta that also eat a lot of hot and spicy acidic foods. So you want to eat more like cucumber and watermelon, coconut, leafy greens, things that are hydrating because pittas burn off a lot of their hydration, but that are cool and refreshing as well. Avoid a lot of excessive exposure to the sun and heat. Stay hydrated because that helps to cool your body. And then the adequate rest and sleep is helpful. And one of the things that happens when we get into the clock at 10 o'clock, pitta starts to rise again. And so if you don't get to bed by 10, then you're going to get your second wind. And then the pitta will rise, and then all of a sudden you'll be working and you'll be very productive perhaps, but you won't be sleeping or resting. And then there's different herbs that balance all the different doshas. So it's helpful to know what those are, and then you could include more of those in your cooking as well. So kapha, we're these heavy, slow people. We're more likely to have a depressed state in the mind rather than a nervous agitation. In nervous system terms, we might maybe go into freeze a little bit more. And so we need to eat warm, light, and kind of avoid the heavy, oily, sweet foods. Include lots of heating spices like ginger and cinnamon, and to engage in regular activity that's vigorous. So for me, when I think about doing a yoga practice, I don't ever want to do like a hot yoga practice or a Ashtanga yoga where it's very strong. And what I like to do is kind of ease into it. So if you have a lot of kapha going on, you're not going to be attracted to something that's really vigorous. But when we ease into it, then we kind of waken up that interest in doing something that's more vigorous. And then it feels really good to start to do that. So I notice that with my walks and when I'm riding my bicycle, things like that. Meditation, again, relaxation is always helpful for all of them. And then with kapha, we want to invigorate the body. So if you're using essential oils, eucalyptus, peppermint, some of those are helpful to kind of invigorate or stimulate. And to do things that are energizing, but to do them in a way that's still kind to our body, where we're easing our way into them. And then once we get going a little bit, then we have more inspiration. So these are some of the tests that you can have. The online test at the Chopra Center is very quick. It'll come back to you. I think it's 10 questions or something. But some of the other ones and some of the resources on here are really helpful for going a little bit deeper. So with this topic, it's a little bit different than our normal topics where we talk about one specific thing, we do an inquiry, and then we share about that. This is a little bit different. We're going to do a lot more investigation and looking into it. Next week, we're going to work a little bit with some practices that we can use to balance our doshas. What I thought would be helpful to start with is maybe this week is to start working with the Ayurvedic clock from 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. is the pitta time. And this is why they suggest to eat your main meal at noon because your digestive fire is strongest at noon. And that's one of the reasons. Also, it's good to not go to sleep with a whole bunch of undigested food in your stomach. But they also suggest to get to sleep by 10 o'clock because then that fire, instead of using it for getting your second wind and getting a bunch more work done, you could actually use it to digest your food and also to digest the experiences that you have through your dreams. From 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. until 6 is the time of vata. And so that's more likely, if we get to bed at 10, we might sleep quite heavily until around 2. And then as we get into like 3, 4, 5, the vata energy is starting to become predominant. That's often when we'll get up to go to the bathroom or we're just not sleeping as heavily. If you can get up before 6 o'clock, so sometime around 5 is usually when they recommend 5:30. Now, this doesn't work for everybody in our daily life, but if it's something that you could do, it would be an interesting experiment. Then you can wake up while that vata is that energizing, moving energy. You tend to feel a little bit more awake. So that can be helpful. You'll wake up and feel more wakeful. And then from 6 to 10, so in the morning and in the evening, is kapha. So that's a very heavy energy. If you're getting up at like 7 or 8 in the morning, oftentimes there's a sleepiness or a heaviness that comes along with that. Now, in the evening, it's a little bit more conducive because from 6 to 10 in the evening, as we get that heavier, more stable energy, we're starting to wind down our day. We're starting to perhaps have some social interaction. We're having a lighter supper. We might be reading or watching a screen or something. But that is naturally a slower, more stable time. You can watch if you want. There's a link there from on my YouTube channel. I did one of these Sunday classes way back when about the Ayurvedic clock, and you can learn more about it there.